The daily debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing on the presidential elections. Two nominations, the Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton, are running for the 45th position as the President of the United States. And joining us here in the studio to shed more light on this issue is Ambassador محمد, former Assistant Foreign Minister. We're also joined by Dr. محمد الحليم, the political analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our discussion, let's check out this report regarding the latest poll for the presidential elections that saw Hillary Clinton edge Donald Trump for about 46.6% to Trump's 44.8%. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
U.S. voters began to cast their ballots to choose between two presidential candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The results of the elections will begin appearing from Wednesday, November the 9th. Ahead of elections day, both candidates sprinted towards the finish line of the most bitter, divisive and fear-tainted U.S. presidential election of modern times, with polls showing Clinton has the edge. Pressing to lock in her electoral advantage in the final hours of the 2016 campaign, Clinton summoned the collective firepower of the last two Democratic presidents on Monday, whilst Trump scrambled furiously across state lines in a last-ditch bid to scale the blue wall of support she's built. Advantages on qualifications and temperament are holding firm as Clinton's prime strengthens in the elections, whilst weakness in her previous honesty is keeping Trump in the hunt in the campaign's final days. Even though both candidates are remarkably unpopular, there's more affirmative voting for Clinton than for Trump, a factor that can motivate turnout. The majority of her supporters mainly support her rather than opposing Trump. That's pretty much reversed for Trump. 51% of his backers mainly oppose Clinton rather than support him. Third-party candidates Gary Johnson and Jill Stein have 4% and 2% support respectively, with no clear indication that they disproportionately take votes from either candidates. Whilst the usually aligned national vote preferences don't necessarily reflect the Electoral College vote, as in 2000. Indeed, Clinton's lead holds only in solid or leaning Democratic states with the largest share of the likely voter population. Trump leads by a smaller margin in GOP-aligned states, and it's 45 to 48% Clinton to Trump in the toss-ups in aggregate. Critical to her prospects, Clinton leads Trump by a broad 55 to 36% amongst likely voters in being seen as more qualified to serve as president, and by an even wider margin, 58-32%, as having the better personality and temperament for the job. She leads him by narrower 7-point and 8-point margins in empathy and moral character. But it's Trump +4 on honesty, 40 to 44%, not a significant gap, but a comparative weakness for Clinton. She clearly trailed Trump on his measure shortly after the FBI announced its renewed investigation into emails linked to her private server. In previous tracking data, she lagged Trump by 9 points in trust to handle corruption in government. 93% of Trump's supporters see him as more honest and trustworthy than Clinton.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And before we start our discussion, let us take this phone call from Mr. Mohammed Satuhi, the journalist and political analyst staying at the United States. Hello, Mr. Satuhi, can you hear us?
Yes, I do, but it's not very clear.
Mr. Satuhi, first of all, can you update us on the latest developments in the elections? Are there any sort of indications of who is edging who within these polls?
Well, we can't really tell for sure who is ahead at this moment. As you know, people can't really predict until all the ballots are closed, because, we remember the experience of Florida in 2002 between Al Gore and George W. Bush. And we had many issues at the time, and people now are very careful not to give any indication. I'm talking about the U.S. media and others. So people can do some measuring here and there, but until maybe late at night, we'll not be able to tell for sure who is ahead and who is back.
Well, what about the turnout? Is everyone turning out for the elections? Is everyone casting their ballots? Because there was a lot of talk about people abstaining, actually, not going to the polls and not casting their ballots because they don't really like either of the candidates.
Well, it depends. In some areas, we saw many long lines of voters who are waiting. But, you know, it's not just the turnout. It is who is turning out more than others. I mean, are we talking about white people, white men, white women, Hispanics, black, you know, minorities in general? As you know, if you are talking about white men, less educated, they vote more for Donald Trump. White women are more for Hillary. White women in general are much more for Hillary. So people are very, you know, interested now in studying every indication, whether or not it's supporting or it's a good indication for Hillary or for Donald Trump. At this moment, we cannot really tell, but from the early vote, we can say that Hillary was ahead, but this is not enough because, as we know from experience, it was much better for the Democrats in the early voting process, but later in the voting day, it was much better for the Republicans. So we have to wait and see whether or not the Republicans can make up for the lost ground during the early vote.
Were there any reports of any irregularities or violence taking place around any of the polling stations so far?
I wouldn't say there is much in any serious claim here or there. Of course, we've heard Donald Trump many times talking about the rigged system, the rigged elections, but I don't think there is much credibility into this kind of claim. He once said that I will recognize the results if I win. Well, this is not the way you can judge the election, whether or not it was rigged, but nobody takes it seriously, to be sure. Of course, there are irregularities here and there. Some people complained about the machines and so on, but this happens in every single election, and it's not a reason for itself to say that it wasn't really good or it was rigged.
Mr. Mohammed Sotouhi, the journalist and political analyst from the United States, thank you very much for joining us. Now, first of all, Ambassador Shazli, before we talk about the nitty-gritty details of the elections, how would you evaluate the process so far, the three debates, the performance of both candidates? How would you evaluate the process of the campaigning by both nominees?
I think this is a very salient point at the moment, because I think tomorrow, when the results are out, there are going to be two losers. The candidate who loses the elections, and I think the image of the United States. I think this election has been notorious in the way the campaigns have been run. I have witnessed many, all over the years, many campaigns, presidential campaigns. I have never seen them degenerate to this level of personal attacks and character assassination. I think the last time the United States saw such an election was in 1894 when Grover Cleveland, his opponent, found out that he had an illegitimate child, and the whole issue was over this, and then he accused his opponent of taking bribes and of corruption. I think this will affect very much the image of the United States, the image of the politics, and the image of the democracy in the United States. Free debate is one thing, and obscenity is another. I mean, if you have free debate, you center on issues, you center on policies, you don't degenerate to personal attacks and so on. The Republican Party I think, had a tremendous advantage in this election. They have majorities in both houses, the Senate and the Congress. They have a majority in the number of governors of states. I think they shot themselves in the foot by putting forward Donald Trump with his antiques. I mean, even if if you watch the debates, the body language, the facial expressions. I mean, you could see this in people calling the public to attend a service, not to attend the election of the highest executive office in the United States.
Yes. Well, Dr. Al-Halim, now, it has been quite a controversial campaign for both nominees. When Obama was running for the first and the second time, it was everyone, all the Americans wanted change. They wanted a change to the better, whether domestically or internationally with their international relationships with other countries. But what about now? What do the Americans want from their next president? Because now they're going, and a lot of talk has been, we're picking a bad choice, definitely. There are two bad choices, and we're going to have to pick one. That's what they say. What do the Americans want? What are they concerned with mainly? Is it the domestic issues, domestic affairs, or international ones?
Right. Before I begin with, I'd like to say good evening for you and for all our own viewers. Well, to begin with, the Americans have always been the same, here, there, and everywhere. They have got a certain strategy and a certain political demands as much as domestic needs, actually. Well, this is the strategy that the Americans have been born with, and they are fixing their own eyes every now and again, here, there, and everywhere. The fact that they have always looking on the elections in much in the same way as they are looking on their own prejudices and their own materialistic needs. They are not very much concerned with what you might call, I mean, the international peace or the world peace, as much as they are very much self-isolated within themselves. They are living within their own ivory tower, the Americans, in such a way as to be very much asking their own presidential nominee in the future to be as much as minimizing the value-added taxes, the VAT, as much as looking for the problem of the masked unemployment and solving their own domestic problems. As they really are, as citizens, as civilians, they are not very much concerned with what is happening in Syria or the devastation that is occurring in the Syrian land, about Aleppo, about Deir ez-Zor, or about any sort of Arab countries. Particularly, I mean, Hillary Clinton nowadays would seem to be the best among the rest in the eyes of all the Americans. Comparing her own situation with the previous debates, side by side with, Donald Trump, for the three previous debates, Donald Trump was far from being successful, was representing himself as very much a man who is living in an ivory tower, a man who is very much arrogant, too very much, evaluating himself to a greater extent to the fact that he would seem to be before the eyes and before the faces of all the American citizens as a distant star, actually, as a man that is offshore and off the scene. And that's what the American wouldn't like to do. Whereas if you compare the situation of Hillary Clinton being a woman, ruled American life during the previous 8 years, where being the fact that she had been at one stage of her own life, the first lady, actually, the first, lady of the first man who is supposed to be the most powerful man in the whole world, ruling the most powerful nation, actually, here, there, and everywhere. She has got what you might call a previous tremendous experiences about how to act and react, how to even, face her own voters, how to give them their own promises, apart from the scandalous affairs of the electronic mail and FBI investigations and the retreat of the Federal Bureau investigation, all of which would give us the impression that Obama is always there behind the scene, pushing her every now and again. And Obama himself has got what you might call a hidden agenda, very much specific purposes that is related to himself, which is, nominating Michelle Obama at one stage to push her a bit forward immediately after the period of Hillary Clinton. apart from the points of weaknesses that Donald Trump is trying actually to initiate every now and again in the figure of Hillary Clinton, the American people are far from being very much concerned about personal affairs, about the scandalous ties of her own previous husband, that is Bill Clinton, about the monstrous previous scandalous affair with Monica Lewinsky, and all these things that have been criticized for quite a long period of time throughout the 3 debates. The Americans are very much Americans, as they used to be actually. Very much realistic to a greater extent, very much materialistic to a greater extent as well. Looking for their own private needs, asking the future nominate or the future allocated president of the United States of America to be satisfying their own demands, to be quite able actually to be up to the task of satisfying their own needs, particularly, as I have just mentioned at the very beginning, minimizing the value-added taxes, finding suitable chances for employing a large number of Americans, if not them all, actually.
Yes. Well, Ambassador Chesley, you talked about how the campaigning took very much a personal twist. Now, we've seen Hillary Clinton being accused of the FBI investigation within her email scandal. We've seen Donald Trump being accused of many sexual allegations along with evading taxes. So all these sort of criticisms, who do you see being more affected by these scandals, if we may call it?
I think Donald Trump has done every wrong step that you can make on the arena of American politics. First of all, he antagonized the minorities by saying that I'm going to expel 8 million Latinos from the United States. This shows, a lack of knowledge of the society. The United States is par excellence a country of minorities. Everybody, even the dominant, the so-called WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, they are minorities. And when you attack one minority, because of the awareness in the American street, they rally towards one another because they know that as minorities, if we unite, we are going to be a majority. But if we allow one minority to be attacked, the others are going to be follow suit. Therefore, I mean, if you attack the Jews, the blacks will react. If you attack the Latinos, the Arabs will react, and so on. Because it is a country, everybody in the United States is a minority. He antagonized women. He even attacked the establishment. And I think this is a very serious flaw. When you talk about rigging the elections, this means that the system is not working. Every American is concerned that the system should work. He antagonized the FBI by saying that they are covering up for Hillary Clinton. He even antagonized the CIA. I mean, when you talk about that the Russians are meddling in the elections, this is something that affects the CIA. So he has, offended every power source in the United States. Even, you have now after he has antagonized the Latinos, I think yesterday or the day before that, the Crusader, which is the official newspaper for the Ku Klux Klan, has been supporting Donald Trump. This shows, the background of the support he has. I think these are very serious issues in the United States.
Yes.
And I think he has stepped on the long foot and, as I said, shot himself in the foot.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're now joined over the phone by Nile TV's Dina Hawaidak, who is attending the celebration of the American Embassy here in Cairo concerning the presidential elections. Hello, Dina, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Dina, what is the impression that you are getting or receiving so far at this celebration? How are people, who are they inclined to, really?
Yes, the American Embassy in Cairo is holding a celebration on the occasion of the U.S. presidential election for 2016, and being joined right now by Dr. Brian Scott, the press attaché at the American Embassy. Thank you, sir, for joining us on ITV.
Thank you for having me tonight. Thank you for coming
On ITV.
Thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for coming to share this party with us this evening. This is a great event for us.
Can you please talk to us about the program tonight?
Well, we've got several things going on here. We've got some symbolic balloting where people get a chance to cast their vote for the candidate of their choice. We have some trivia questions for people to see how much they know about the U.S. election system and the electoral system in the United States. And we have a lot of people here just enjoying the evening and sharing it with us. It's pretty exciting.
And how did you personally follow up the election since the morning?
Well, we've been watching this closely. This campaign has been going on for quite a while. We've been watching it very closely, and I'm impressed, in fact, at how much interest there's been on the part of the Egyptians in the election as well. We have been gearing up for this for some time, certainly from today. We'll be watching it tonight. We'll be watching it through the night for the results sometime tonight or tomorrow.
So speaking about elections, can you please talk to us or explain to us how the American voting process is different than the Egyptian voting process?
As you know, there are 50 states in the United States. So at one level, the U.S. presidential election system is very complicated. People actually elect what are called electors, and then the electors cast their vote for the candidate of their choice. Now, generally speaking, in 99% or more of the times, they cast their votes for the people, for the candidate that the electorate, that is, the people have cast their votes for. And then all of those votes are tallied up, and the first candidate to reach 270 electoral votes is declared the winner.
And what happened if we have a tie here, if two candidates got like 27, what happened?
Well, if there's a tie, then it goes into the House of Representatives. Decisions are made there. Votes are cast again there. There's a process for it to happen. There's a process that's worked for over 200 years, and we look forward to it continuing this year.
And what do you think about the American-Egyptian relationship? How it would be different if Hillary Clinton won, if Donald Trump won?
What I can tell you is this. I can tell you that we're here, and we're here working with the Egyptians. We've got the current administration until January. And what I can tell you is this, is that we look forward to continuing to work with Egyptians. Myself, my colleagues around the embassy have enjoyed our time here. We work in a variety of fields: education, economic development, obviously security assistance, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you and with the rest of the Egyptian people.
Thank you, sir, for your time. Thank you for joining us on ITV.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the evening.
Back to the studio. This was my interview with Dr. Brian Scott, press attaché here from the event.
Thank you very much, Dina. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dina Hawaidak at the celebration of the American Embassy here in Cairo regarding the American presidential elections. Now, Dr. Al-Halim, now, talking about the Arab nations and the Arab populations, a lot of people they have this concept of actually believing that, well, yes, Hillary Clinton might seem like the more reasonable, less outspoken of the two candidates. However, Donald Trump would be a better candidate for the Arab world, as they both have different policies regarding the crises that are taking place in Syria, Libya, and Iraq as well. What do you think?
Well, to begin with, I'd like to say that we shouldn't be very much duped by the appearances and by the impressions that they might get. On the Arab nation, still remember since about, about 8 years ago when Obama came for the first time to Cairo University and started talking about, about Islam, saying Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, and all these nice Arab words and all these things that are taken from the Holy Quran, just by way of pretending actually to be on the side of the Arabs. Solidifying the situation of the Palestinian refugees as much as assisting the Arab nation here, there, and everywhere. But far from being true. This was what you might call the political game, particularly when it comes to the United States of America. A certain nation with the size and the power of the American nation dominating the whole world, and not only socially, but also from economic point of view. I would say that the strategy of the United States of America wouldn't be deeply influenced by either the appearance of Donald Trump on the political scene, nor even the absence of Hillary Clinton, or the appearance of both, actually, in any conceivable respect. the United States of America seem to be quite very much, adapting a certain strategy that should never ever actually changed unless it seems to be within the interests of the Americans as much as within the interests of the Israel as well. The fact that we wouldn't have to and we shouldn't actually forget the very great role that's being played by the Jewish lobby, assisting and solidifying and pushing one of them actually in the interests of Israel. And it was, as I've told before, that a couple of months ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu was very much interested of adding the Golan Heights actually as a permanent part to the Israeli land at one stage of his own meeting in there. And this will give us the impression that no matter, the would-be presidential nominee would be either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, both of them, either each one of them would seem to be quite very much interested in establishing the interests and the values as much as, the domestic, the social, as well as the political interests of both countries. That is the United States on the one hand and the Israeli land on the other. So we shouldn't be very much optimistic outside of, accepting these and rejecting that. Both of them would seem to be wide channeled within the same route, within the same way, which is, solidifying and establishing the mutual interests and the mutual identification between the Israeli nation on the one hand and the American on the other. I think, the moments would seem to be quite very much crucial and sensitive, particularly because of the role that's being played by the United States of America in Syria, as much as the Russian counterpart. Both countries are very much commonly regarded as superpowers. Dismantling and, devastating the infrastructure of Syria in the interest of the Jewish policy as well as the lobby. And this will give us also the impression that no matter how those two powers would seem to be quite outward seeming, very much in tussles and in confrontation with each other, but the fact remains deep down that they are working within the same hidden agenda, which is establishing the interests of the Jewish land and the Israeli people as well. So we'd have to be very much aware and very much cautious actually about, the strategy that is to be adapted in future, either by Hillary Clinton or by Donald Trump. Both of them would seem to be quite very much channeled within the same direction, as I've just said, which is the extreme, interests of the American nation as much as the Jewish people.
Well, Ambassador Chesley, that is a point of view seen by many political analysts, that it doesn't really matter who wins the presidential elections, whether if it's Clinton or Trump. None of them will actually go through with all their strong rhetoric and all these opposite directions that they say they're going to take the country towards. And it's really going to be determined by the Congress and the House of Representatives and what they feel the American administration should go through. Same as what happened when Obama was elected as president. Everyone expected a 180 change that will take place within the Arab world at least, but nothing really lived up to these hopes and aspirations attached to Obama. Do you think it doesn't really make a difference? It's more or less going to be the same policy decided by those two houses?
I've been following the American elections, presidential elections, for over 40 years. And I'm sorry to say that we never learned the lesson. Every time there is an election in the United States, we have a favorite candidate. And usually this candidate proves in the end to be disastrous for us. As George W. Bush, he was hailed as the savior of the Arabs at some time. And then we saw what came out of it. So long as the Arabs keep on thinking that their problems are going to be solved by the Americans, by the Europeans, by the Russians, by the Chinese, I don't think there's any hope. If we don't take things into our own hands, my colleague was saying that the Americans are interested in the VAT more than what is happening in Syria. I agree very much. But what about the Arabs? I mean, who in the Arab world has done something meaningful to stop the bloodshed in Syria, to stop the bloodshed in Libya, to stop the bloodshed in Iraq, to stop the bloodshed in Yemen? The foreign forces, because of the Arabs' complacency, are now deciding the fate of the Arabs for the Arabs. And this will be according to the agendas of these foreign nations. The Americans are not in Syria to stop the bloodshed. They have an agenda there. The Russians are not in Syria to stop the bloodshed. They have an agenda there. The Iranians, the Turks, everybody has an agenda except the Arabs. So long as this, pitiful and horrendous state of affairs, I don't think there is any hope for us until we pull ourselves together and close our ranks and carry on our responsibilities.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we are speaking, the electoral process is still going on in the United States. Hopefully the results will be out in the early hours of tomorrow. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Citizens cast their ballots on Tuesday to pick a new president, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Their ballot choices would seal the fate of the U.S. presidential aspirants. Although the grim picture of the victorious candidate would begin to emerge in less than 24 hours after the elections, the electoral process will officially get over on January 2nd, 2017. Although Clinton once held a 12 percentage point lead over Trump, the gap has been shrunk in an unprecedented manner. According to a survey released by ABC News on Monday, Trump was leading over Clinton by 1 point. However, the latest opinion poll released by New York Times, CBS News, puts Clinton ahead by 3 percentage points. Democratic candidate is opponent to secure votes for 45% Americans, whereas her Republican rival is stated to have consolidated grip over 42% of the electorate. Although voters in U.S. directly elect the president, the electoral process is not direct. In each of the 50 states, the electors are nominated by all the candidates ahead of the election. The number of electors in each state is fixed according to the number of representatives and senators it sends to the Congress. Traditionally, the primary elections are indirect elections where voters cast ballots for a slate of party delegates pledged to a particular candidate. Party's delegates then officially nominate a candidate to run on the party's behalf. The general election in November is also an indirect election where voters cast ballots for a slate of members of the Electoral College. These electors in turn directly elect the president and vice president. Total number of electors nominated from all 50 states will be 535. However, 3 electors are nominated separately from the District of Columbia. Therefore, the total number is 538. To secure the presidential berth, a candidate requires the vote of at least 270 electors on January the 2nd.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
And so, my friends, it is with humility, determination, and boundless confidence in America's promise that I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Will Democrats Hillary Clinton or Republicans Donald Trump be the next U.S. president?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And now we're joined over the phone from Illinois, Chicago, by Dr. Sharif Nasser, president of the Interfaith Alliance. Hello, Dr. Nasser, can you hear us?
Good evening, sir. How are you, sir?
Very well. Dr. Nasr, first of all, can you fill us in on the latest developments? What are the main reactions that you are receiving so far, being president of the Interfaith Alliance in Chicago? Who are voters swinging to?
Chicago, the city of Chicago, is part of the state of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And the state of Illinois is almost guaranteed to be in the corner of Hillary Clinton, meaning Hillary Clinton will win Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
It is states that are highly likely going to be Democratic. They call them blue states because the blue color is the color of the Democratic Party. The red color is the color of the Republican Party. So people who follow the analysis and they do analyze the numbers, they believe that Hillary Clinton is the likely winner. However, that's not going to be confirmed until in the morning Egyptian time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Nasr, what about the swing states? Usually the swing states are Ohio, Iowa, Michigan, Colorado, North Carolina. Where do you feel these swing states will head towards?
The swing states are likely, enough of them are likely to be in the corner of Hillary Clinton. The winner of the presidency needs to have 270 electoral votes. And Hillary Clinton is expected to have well over the 270 electoral votes, according to many analysts. However, Comey, the director of the FBI, he has done something contrary to the FBI regulations. The FBI regulations prohibit prosecutor from releasing any information about any investigation the FBI or any prosecutor is pursuing. You're not supposed to release information about any investigation until the investigation is completed and unequivocally clear as of the conclusion of the investigation. That's not only the regulation of the FBI, this is the regulation that affects and controls any prosecutor in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He himself has violated these regulations by speaking that Hillary Clinton is going to be investigated for her email server.
Yes.
And 2 days ago, he came with the conclusion that the investigation has proven that there's no change in the status of Hillary Clinton in the matter of investigating her private email server, that whatever she done would not cause her any indictment.
Yes.
She did not break
Dr.
the law.
Nasr, the impression that we're getting here and in many parts of the world is that it's a very close race between both candidates. However, the sentiment is really favoring Clinton, and we're seeing in the polls, and many of the states that you've mentioned are really favoring Clinton to be the winner. How true is that? Are we getting the right impression, or are you seeing it differently over there?
No, that's the right impression. Clinton is the likely winner. However, Trump, he is a very clever and very, he's a very serious candidate he is considered to be a fascist personality, and he is considered to be somebody who personifies white racism in its most ugliest face. He is the personification of white racism in its ugliest characters.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a serious liar.
Yes.
He's no good. He's bad.
Dr. Sharif Nasr. Dr. Sharif Nasr from Dr. Sharif Nasr from Illinois, Chicago, President of the Interfaith Alliance. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Dr. Al-Halim, we've been talking about how it's being perceived, this race in the Arab world, but if we look specifically at Egypt, now, in the last visit of President Sisi to the United States, he actually met both candidates. But who do you feel would be the best interests for Egypt, having a relationship with the U.S. administration with Trump on top, or Hillary?
Right. Well, it's after all what you might call the political game. I wouldn't say that each one of them would seem to be quite supporting the Egyptian case, or even the Arab case, or the Palestinian case, actually. As I've just said, about a couple of minutes ago, that they would have to, establish the interests of the United States of America in the first instance. This is on the one thing. And from another, actually, we wouldn't have to forget that Hillary Clinton, at one stage during the period when she was living in the White House, being the First Lady, actually, of the United States of America, and immediately after that, when she played the role of being the foreign minister, actually, she was having what you might call the upper hand in establishing, the revolutions of the Arab Spring, of demolishing the infrastructure of the Arab countries, of devastating Tunisia, and in the meantime of establishing, lastly, what you might call the Daesh group. And immediately after the process of fabricating and creating the Daesh group, they would call the assumptions, actually, of putting an end for the terrorism on a large scale. So they would, what you might call, create the sort of the thing and would try to put the other extreme opposite of it. So, I mean, Clinton, or Hillary Clinton, was playing side by side with Condoleezza Rice, what you might call the very devastating role of the creative anarchy, of demolishing all the Arab countries, the sort of the revolution that has started in Tunisia and then passing through the other Arab countries, that would at the end give us the impression that she's far from being very much, friendly, would-be elected nominee of the future. Neither would Donald Trump, for, as the report would say, that he's a fascist, very much, attacking the Muslims. At one stage of his own speeches during the first or the second debate, he would say that he would forbid all the Arabs and all the Muslims of entering into the United States of America. And then he came at the second instance saying that except for those people who would come from what you might call a terrorist land, or a land of terrorism. And as such, both of them would seem to be quite, as I've just mentioned, calling for the interests of the American land, of the American people, establishing the strategic interests of Israel, and in the meantime looking on the Arab from above. Actually, that is the case with most of the Americans. And here lies the, what you might call the problematic situation. Selecting and rejecting one of them in the side of the Arabs wouldn't seem to be the right option. And as just our dear friend, Mr. Ambassador, said, that we never benefit actually from the previous lessons, from the previous experiences. During the late Muhammad Anwar Sadat, the victorious, and the triumphant, president in this battle of 6th of October war, the Arab countries, and on top of them Saudi Arabia, would suppress and oppress the arrival of the petrol, of the oil, actually to the United States of America, to the West. Nowadays, they are using the self-same tool and the self-same political game. They are suppressing Saudi Arabia, actually, of providing us, Surah Aramco, with the petrol needed, actually, for the Egyptian usages of everyday life. So they are using and manipulating, actually, the self-same weapons that have been at our own hands at one stage of our own moment of unification. The wide disparity of the Arab nation, the extreme sense of failure and fiasco, and the extreme sense of weakness on the part of the Arab League, actually, would give the impression that we are away, we are wide apart, and as such, solidification and the victorious aspect would come from within, not from without. We should call ourselves for the sort of the thing that would put what you might call a helping hand to solve the problem from within, rather than waiting for executions and solving and keys actually from without.
Yes,
that's the case. Yeah.
Well, Ambassador Chesley, when we look at both candidates, we see that definitely Hillary Clinton has much more of a political experience, being First Lady, being a senator, being the foreign minister, the Secretary of State for a period of time. So she does have the know-how of being a politician and the experience to deal with everything that comes with that. However, Donald Trump doesn't have any of these political experiences, but he is considered one of the wealthiest people in the world. He has a lot of economic prowess that could be beneficial for the economy of the United States, and in a way, doing good business with the international community, that could be seen as a way to have better political relations with different countries based on strong economic performances by his administration. Who do you think the American citizen needs more? A better foreign policy or a better economic condition domestically and internationally as well?
If you look at the history of the presidents of the United States, you'll find that nearly 99% come from either Congress, the Senate, a governor of a state, or the military. With the exception of George W. Bush, who had no political experience behind him. And we have seen what George W. Bush has done. Even George W. Bush he came from a political family. His father was president. His brother, Jeb Bush, was governor of Florida. So, I mean, he had some contact with politics. If you look at Donald Trump, I mean, he's a phenomenon. With all the negative things I have said about him, I think he has one very powerful skill. And that is, he has been able to convince the working class that their interest coincides with that of big business. If big business prospers, we are going to create more jobs, we are going to give better salaries, we are going to give better benefits. So he was able to rally the working class. I think, you know, the internal politics is a salient thing today in the United States. The United States now is very concerned and very worried about losing its position as leader of the world. If you look at, for instance, the car industry, in the 1950s and the 1960s, the American automobile was the king of the road all over the world. Now it is the Japanese and the Europeans, the Koreans, and the Chinese are coming in. If you look at the aircraft industry, it was the American. Boeing was king of the skies. Today it is threatened by Airbus. Today, China is even threatening the United States at being the #1 technological power in the world. In last June, China has unveiled the fastest supercomputer in the world, which has always been American. Look at a couple of days ago, the Chinese wanted to send astronauts to the International Space Station. The United States said that our law does not permit to cooperate with Chinese on rockets and things. Yes. They sent in a Chinese rocket, in a Chinese space ship.
Yes.
Even, you know, a country like India Last week they announced that they are going to buy 300 fighter aircraft on condition that they be manufactured in India. This means that the American worker is going to lose jobs because it's going to be manufactured by Indian workers.
Yes.
The Americans are very concerned about their economy, about the prestige of being the #1 technological power in the world.
Yes.
And I think Donald Trump was able to play on this fear by portraying himself, his slogan, I will make America great again. So he has played on this. I mean, this is his real skill.
Yes.
And he has convinced the labor forces that their interests lies with him. And there is no clash between the interests of big business and interests of the labor.
Well, we ran out of time, but quick question. Who do you think will win, and who would you hope for to win?
I think Hillary Clinton is going to win. I don't hope for anybody to win.
And Dr. Al-Halim?
Certainly the First Lady in the past, here and then, which is Hillary Clinton, I would say.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll definitely be following up all the developments taking place regarding the American presidential elections here till the early hours of tomorrow. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Dr. Muhammad Al-Halim, the political analyst. I'd also like to thank very much Ambassador Mohammed Al-Shazli, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.
I humbly and gratefully accept